Here we go.
G'day fans and welcome back to another exciting episode of Rip It Off the Card. It is a Wednesday night and guess what fans, I am still sick. I picked up COVID a week ago and I tell you what, it has absolutely sucked the big one. So I was laid up in bed for a few days. I've still got the sniffles, I've still got the coughs, my voice is different. I'm diseased. So what do you reckon, Mr. Aaron? Not good, eh?
That's soft. I've still got a sore throat, and it's been 6 weeks now. So stop complaining.
Yeah, I do hear that the cough sort of tends to stick around for even a month of Sundays, and it's just like bloody hell. So I'm like been living in my bedroom, like it's almost like the days of being a teenager again, just living in the bedroom, never coming out for anything. And so this is my first appearance in a week, and yeah, I got to tell you, I'm lucky we didn't do this show about 4 or 5 days ago. It would have been a complete disaster, but. Anyway, we battle on. What do you reckon, old son?
Well, I've had a busy week too. I've had a couple of collections come into the shop. The shop's totally bombed out and there's no room in there. And we're planning a sale, which we'll talk about later. So all systems go on from my end.
Very good. I like the Moneybag Sullivan says greetings programs. That's actually really rather relevant. So in about our promo that we'll be doing later on is very, very Tron focused. Yes, the plague dags. Yes, plague exactly dog. Right. So I believe I'm not contagious anymore, right? But I'm not the way I was when you saw me like the previous week where I was perfectly healthy. So yes. Gavin said I'm doing an impression of Davros. Oh, there you go. Yeah, with the black tongue and everything. So good stuff. Very, very cool. Oh, yes, right, Michael. Yes, ale. Everything must go. We're chucking things away. The people chuck away ex-used staff members if you want, because I'm sure some of those one or two individuals could go out with a bit of a cheap price. What do you reckon there, Mr. Aaron?
Yeah, we have got some NQR staff members, haven't we?
Yes, that's exactly right. Tell you what, dodgy all the way. Anyway, we've got a big show tonight. Moneybag Sullivan's going to love this because it is absolutely chock-a-block with friggin' Docky Who stuff. EA team. So if anything's going to make me feel any worse, it'll be that. And I'm only gagging. It's all good. But yes, it should be very, very exciting. What do you reckon, Mr. Aaron? You've been chopping at the bit to do this one. Is that right?
It is the most Doctor Who packed show yet, isn't it? I think in every single segment we've got Doctor Who news.
Yeah, I agree with Colin. Yeah, the actual show is not quite right. Totally agree with it. And talking about like Davros's tongue a moment ago, you never know where the tongue has been. It's not where it's been, it's where it's going. That's what you need to worry about. So, yes, and Mark is very, very happy. We've got a bit of Docky Who time. Yay, team. Very good. Everybody's gone the Docky Who. It's DOCKY, not double CY. Jeez, learn to spell, everybody.
If you're going to say it wrong, at least say it wrong correctly.
Exactly right. All right, so before we get into it, normally when we kick the show off, we talk about how cold it is and how busy Aaron's been and how sick I am. We get into the news section, but we're actually going to make a slight change tonight because this week has been a rather bad week. If you're a bit of a fan of the old pop culture, because we've had a few people drop off for the purchase at worst. So, Mr. Aaron, mate, you wanted to bring up a couple of people who are no longer with us, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's been one of those sad weeks where I think most people in most fandoms have probably been touched by the loss of a couple of really amazing actors that have passed away in the last week. The first one is Nichelle Nichols from Star Trek, who was quite a groundbreaking actress, mainly because of her color in being in Star Trek as a leading character, when at that time that just didn't happen in Hollywood.
Yeah, exactly right. And it's funny because by today's standards, having an African-American lady in a show like this would be considered like a no-brainer, whereas back then it was a very controversial. And of course, the sequence where she kisses Kirk was like, oh my God, the interracial kiss, so you can't have that, and all this sort of stuff. Stuff by today's standards, you're going, mate, settle down, guys. What's the big deal? But, you know, someone had to start, someone had to be the first, and good on them for doing it.
I think she was in the background a lot because Roddenberry wanted her in the show more, but the executives didn't, so they kind of snuck her in more and more and more till later in the show she was more of a main character than she started out.
Yeah, exactly right. And history has shown there were a lot of women who joined NASA and the space programs who were African American, all inspired by Nichelle Nichols. And I think Whoopi Goldberg was actually one of the ones who got into acting because of Nichelle. So a trailblazer for sure, and will definitely be sadly missed. Another person who is no longer with us, and this one when it came up, you go, oh, geez, man, that cuts. Good old David Warner.
Well, what hasn't David Warner been in? I think he's been in just about every major franchise except maybe Star Wars. But as you can see just from there, there's Star Trek and Planet of the Apes, and there's Somewhere in Time and Time Bandits. He really is an actor that has, over the years, embraced pop culture and genre material. There, one of my favorite horror movies is The Omen, and he played the reporter in The Omen. Yeah, of course. So he was in quite a few amazing performances. Is that me
sorry,
going or you?
You just sort of froze up there. We kind of lost some of your voice. So can you just, I got late amazing performance as well as the last bit you said just before that?
Well, all of the things that he's in, he is a classic actor that gives amazing performances. He's been in a lot of genre stuff. You can see he's been in Doctor Who and Star Trek. He was the great Cardassian in Star Trek that tried to convince Picard how many lights there were, which is one of my favorite episodes of the whole franchise.
Yeah, Chains of Command Part 1 and 2. And it was kind of funny because even though he played he's playing the Cardassian down here and he was the Klingon Chancellor there from Star Trek 6, he was also a Federation representative and ambassador in Star Trek 5, which is kind of funny. So, the guy got around, that's for sure. And for most of the time when you saw him on screen, he always played a bad guy. But when he played a good guy, it was like it's a real shift of focus. And you go, you know what, that is awesome when he did that. So, but he's definitely one for the pop culture fans who go, yep. Whenever his face appeared on screen, and go, yep, good old Davies in it. It's got to be a good thing. So, very, very cool. The MCP is now offline. Yeah, exactly right. Except he didn't do the voice for the MCP. He was Sark. But I see where you're coming from, and I think I get the meaning. So, very, very cool. And this one, of course, this is obviously one for your Doctor Who fans out there, Mr. Bernard Cribbins. Is that right, mate?
It is, yeah. And I mean, he is one of those sort of legendary English actors that's always been around. I always knew Bernard Cribbins because he was the voice of the narrator from the Wombles. But he was in a lot of shows, and when you look at his resume, he's done some great and amazing stuff. He's probably his first famous role was in The Railway Children, but he's turned up in so many things. He was in Fawlty Towers as a classic character, and of course he's been in Doctor Who right from the 60s, where he played Tom Campbell in the Dalek Invasion of Earth with Peter Cushing. It's one of the best things about the movie. And then, of course, he came back 50 years later to play Wilf, Donna's granddad, and became one of the favourite characters in Doctor Who for a whole new generation of people. So he will be sadly missed. And his last role is going to be in Doctor Who because they were filming stuff with him about a month ago for the new series with David Tennant. So that'll be quite sad that he'll be gone and won't be in it after that.
Good one from Christy here. And another hero gone. He's wombling around heaven. Exactly right. So I do like that. And even though he had the spelling wrong, Rusky Babes was here for both the Daleks and Basil Fawlty. You could argue which one was more evil of the two, which is particularly groovy. As soon as I saw it, it's like, every English person in the universe, which is kind of a cockeyed way of saying, has been in Doctor Who. So I'm not surprised. So he was in it in the past, and he's about to pop up again. So, so would you be, it'll be a bit of a moment when he appears on screen. You go, oh man, Jesus. So.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the episodes he in will probably be dedicated to him as well. I think everyone on the set loved him because he was a genuinely nice person as well as to fans and as an actor as well.
Very good stuff. So, so some sad news this week regarding some famous celebrities. But let's move on to some more stuff that's going on. And ironically, the bad news just keeps on coming. You'll find out in a sec once we get past this. So if it's not celebrities passing away, it's companies producing shit that is really cool.
Well, usually we report on stuff that you can go and buy that's new. but we're reporting of one of the major suppliers of popular culture stuff worldwide has closed down and folded and got into receivership, and that is Eagle Moss. And for people who don't know what Eagle Moss do, they're one of those partworks companies where they get you to take up a subscription, and before you know it, you've got 200 Star Trek ships when you buy one a week kind of thing. Now, I feel sorry for the people. If you get the Star Trek ships, that's fine. But I feel sorry for the people who were completing builds, because the other thing they do, you can see in this picture, you can get large and expensive items, but you put them together week by week or month by month, depending on when the subscriptions come. And because you're paying $19 a fortnight, after you've done it for 3 or 4 years, you've put thousands and thousands of dollars into this model. And anyone who's partway into their subscription, that's it. They're done. They're not filling them out. They're not going to complete them. And everyone is just left holding the bag. So you might have a 3/4 complete R2-D2 or DeLorean.
So I've been doing a bit of reading about the Eagle Moss stuff. And so, yeah, they've gone to receivership. And of course, as you said, you buy the magazine, you buy the bits and pieces, and there are some people out there said they're like they did an Ecto one from Ghostbusters, and then like 2 issues away from finishing it, or I got 5 issues away from finishing their DeLorean. And it was an interesting point to say, well, clearly the parts have been manufactured, right? Because if they're going to ship them out next month or whatever, so they're going to be around somewhere. It's a question of where. So there's 2 ways of looking at the argument. One is to say it's bad that the company's gone down because, like, obviously they've produced a lot of stuff and a lot of people really loved what they did, and a lot of people cracking the shits over the fact that their models are now not going to be finished. But by the same token, people are going to be laid off out of work, and there's going to be all these jobs that are now suddenly just going to disappear. And so it's a bit of a bitch. Nobody wins, right? And you are right. If you are halfway through building a model and they just send you 2 or 3 bits every month for 10 years to build an R2 or a DeLorean or whatever, I mean, you would be pissed at the fact that it's not finished. And of course, those who got sucked into buying these things in the first place, you do have to wonder what's going on. And I do like this picture you got down here. For those who haven't seen it, the DeLorean, right? 130 model, I assume that's to be the model pieces to stick it all together. Is that what that was?
Yeah. So if you look in the picture, they're all piled up week by week, and someone's selling the entire thing there for $8,000 or whatever it is. But that's how many pieces it takes to build the DeLorean. You can see on the right there, someone's putting it together, and it is a really amazing piece. It lights up. It's electronic. The brake work with the brakes, the lights, and all of that kind of thing. So they are nice pieces, but I don't know if the value is there. And when you complete them all and put them on the secondary market, you don't get the money back you've paid for them, even if you get a good price. I had issues with Eagle Moss, because I was getting the Doctor Who stuff, and even though I subscribed or got stuff every second week, I would miss issues and they couldn't supply them to me, and that's ultimately why I gave up.
It's an interesting one, right? So I know we're sort of dwelling on this a little bit, but build a week at a time and drain your bank account and all this sort of stuff. And as Rusky Babies, you're better off getting an inexpensive full model if there's one available to chip in the long run. But having said that, though, the mindset for some people would be that if you went down this route, and let's assume it's all continued on, there's no dramas, right? The funny thing would be, we'll stick with the DeLorean. You go, okay, 100 people are now buying the magazine. This is very round figures. 100 people are buying the magazines around the world to build the car, right? And they start off, and like 6 months later, a couple drop off, and 6 months after that, another couple drop off. 2 or 3 years later, 4 or 5 years later, whatever it happens to be, you're probably down to the last 3, right? Everybody else is bailed out of it. They said, no, we can't handle it anymore. It's all rubbish. They stick the entire thing together, and they've got the only one from that series, right? And depending on what you do with it, there's a possibility that it would actually, the value of it would go up, because so few people actually went to the trouble of putting it together in the first place. And people who are interested in not just Eagle Moss stuff, but DeLoreans and whatever else will go, that is grouse. Where can I get one of those? You go, well, you can't. You got to assemble the damn thing yourself from all these parts that are no longer around because people just chuck them all out. So that's the mindset, if you can stay committed to it. So I do get the logic behind that.
The reason why that doesn't work so much is the same reason people buy them week by week. There's not many people that can, drop $5,000 on a DeLorean in one go. But if you say you can have an awesome DeLorean and it's going to cost you $19 a fortnight, it's a bit like putting a down payment down on a real car. Not a lot of people go in and buy that car outright. And it's the same when you sell it. There's not as big a market that will then go, that's awesome, I'm going to drop that much money on it. So
I do I do agree with you. And from a financial point of view, that's why somebody would do it. I can't afford a $5,000 model. I'll just pay $100 every month or two, not realizing they're still going to spend $5,000. I agree with you. Once it's complete, though, if it's a one-off design, you do wonder then, it's like, well, I've got everybody else bailed out. Out of the 100 people, I'm the only one left. I got the only complete one. Here it is. I don't know. It's an interesting sort of conundrum. Either way, it's just a hypothetical discussion. One of the things that they did do, and we showed this in the picture, is they did all the Star Trek ships, which ironically you just sold out of recently in the store, I think you mentioned, and they went completely to town on just doing all these Star Trek models, all these ships. Sometimes even like they only just appeared in one episode. So give all credit to them for being very detailed.
Their model works like this, and it's true. It's easier to keep an existing customer than it is to get a new one. So if you've got someone subscribing for the Star Trek ships, it's easier to say, we're going to make another dozen and extend the subscription because people want the whole set, than it is to say, we finished the ships, now we're going to do Battlestar Galactica and start all over again. And that's why you'll find with the Batmobiles they said there's going to be 50 and there's 125. And with the James Bond cars, they said there's going to be 50 and there's 100 odd of those as well, because once they've got you subscribing, they figure the completists want everything. So it is a psychological thing that they do to people to get them to collect as well.
Yeah. And I will concede, I mean, the whole mail order thing, yeah, you're right. It is a trap, right? The amount of people who got into it, not just what Eagle Moss did, but anything where you get a couple of parts every month and you build this thing for year after year after year. And of course, you get to a point you go, you know what, I'm over it. I mean, it is a trap. There's no denying that whatsoever. You've got to be really committed to see it the whole way through. And a lot of people won't. And that's the nature of it. So, yeah, it's definitely not the easiest hobby of all time. And I love the fact that when you get issue 1 and they give you 4 bits and you go, well, what do I do with the 4 bits? By themselves, they're useless. So Chrissy said you'll see them in the op shops in the next few months. Well, incompleted cars and ships and trains and planes and things, you probably will. So it is a bitch, especially if you're committed to the long haul and suddenly the last parts are just not available. Oh, that just kills you. So and where are we? And I agree with Rusky Babes. Yeah, the irony is that model kits are collectible unassembled. I agree with that. And once you make them up, they tend not to be unless industry pros like Martin Bauer made them. So if you do actually have all the magazines of all the bits for all the cars and whatever, and then left them as is, you do wonder if there's any value there. But I agree with who was it? Kelvin, who said, yeah, value's only $10. So you're probably right. So you were talking, sorry, you're going to say something before I move on to the next picture? No. So they did all the Star Trek stuff. Okay, that's all well and good. They did all the ships. Absolutely fantastic. If you love your ships and you especially wanted ships that you could not get anywhere else, it was the way to go. But of course, on the other side of the coin, if Docky Who was the go, mate, you had more Eagle Moss Docky Who things to look at than you could point a Time Lord at. Is that right?
Yeah, well, Doctor Who is the perfect franchise for one of these piecework firms. I guess Star Trek's up there with a lot of episodes as well. But there are so many different characters and so many different monsters and different variants of Daleks and things you can do. You know, you could probably go on forever, and they did new series and classic series and mixed them up. And you've seen this just from working in the shop. They announced that they had gone under about a week ago, and within the week we sold out of all the Star Trek ships, and we've had about 3 different people come in and load up on the Doctor Who figures as well, because they're suddenly not available new anymore, which is funny because, you know, they've always been in the shop and they've always been available, but suddenly just because the company's gone, people have a bit of a panic and decide they need to collect them all. It will be interesting to see if the price goes up or down.
Yeah, in the end, the real bitch of the whole thing is that you have a company who was producing stuff for a pop culture audience, and they were producing really good stuff, whether it be Star Trek or Doctor Who or whether it be magazine things or whatever, and they're gone now, right? And you go, so if you walk into a store going, oh, can I get me a model of a blah or a Doctor Who character of a blah? And they go, nowhere. No one's making one anywhere, right? And the people who were aren't. And so in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of sucked that things have happened the way they've happened, but there
we go.
It goes, I suppose. So
for all those people who were wondering, when will the Doctor Who collection end? Because it just seemed to be going on forever. It's ended.
It has. Yeah, it has ended. Yeah, very, very unfortunate. So for all the people involved, those who bought all the stuff and those who manufactured it and those who designed it and whatever else, yeah, it's just a sad day for everybody all around. But if you do actually have any of that stuff, like your Eagle Moss figures or your ships or whatever, hang on to them because they are now rarities. Very, very cool. Now, speaking of something which is unbelievably rare, it was sticking with the old Doctor Who, as you can almost see, it's just almost giving me a headache just thinking about it. There's a bit of Patrick Troughton and stuff, mate. What's the deal?
Well, anyone who's sort of a Doctor Who fan or just knows media and television would know that there's a lot of missing television from the 60s and 70s even, because companies didn't think it was going to be popular. They showed it once, they sold it a couple of times, and then they basically destroyed the original copies, and that was it. And Doctor Who is one of those shows where there's about 95 episodes missing. Over the last couple of years, the BBC have actually started animating the episodes and replacing the missing episodes with animations using the original soundtrack, because they've got the soundtrack to every single episode because fans recording them. And it's an interesting way of thinking about it. If you're blind, every episode of Doctor Who exists. But the animations have been going on for about the last... probably about 15 years. They did the first one, and they're coming to an end. They've said, we've animated all the ones we're going to, and this is going to be one of the last ones. So this is Abominable Snowmen, about the Yeti in Tibet and Nepal, and it is a classic episode. It's being animated by the team that did Fury from the Deep. Some people love the animation, some people don't. In my opinion, it's good animation. It's not great, and I'd rather have it than not have it at all. So it's good to see these things are coming out. You can see there was the Blu-ray and, of course, the Steelbook version for anyone who collects, the limited edition stuff. But that's coming out in a couple of months. Apparently, there's been a bit of a supply issue with pressing stuff at the moment, so everything's kind of been delayed this year.
It's become it's very interesting you should mention about the animation thing. Some TV shows, and I saw this in Blacklist actually, where they got shut down during COVID. They wanted to finish an episode. They had the audio recording already. They could get the cast to record their audio in the houses or whatever, and they just animated new sequences to fill in the bits they hadn't filmed yet. Yeah. And even that was kind of a bit of a shock to the system. They now said at the start of the show, so, oh, by the way, we're missing bits, so we're just drawing these pictures and stuck them in. And it kind of works. And you can kind of deal with it, and you go, well, it's better to have that than nothing at all. And I agree with you. If you do get to see an animated version of lost episodes of Doctor Who, and if it's done properly, and I have seen, and you have too, where people have gone really stylized and black and whited them and gone the full noir for the William Hartnell stuff, it can be really, really effective. And if the audio is ridgy-dig, because ultimately people don't realize it, that when you're watching a movie with sound, the audio is more important than the video, right? Because you could have a black screen and still listen to what's going on and get it. But if the whole thing is just the screen and there's no sound at all, you're missing a huge part of the dynamic, even though logically you think the vision is more important, and it's not. It's actually the audio. So it's the reason why radio is so successful. So, good on them for doing it too. So well done.
Well, that's it for our news this week, isn't it?
It is. We're talking about collectibles earlier. Gavin was saying about their Star Wars fact files. People who miss issues. Yeah, there is the mindset of saying, got to stick it out to the bitter end to keep buying these things, even if they're long since been made superfluous, and go to the internet now, Wikipedia and whatever else. So, and if you've got Doctor Who fact files in your store, I know that in the doorway, I know because I put them there. And they come under the heading of a great idea at the time, but realistically, a lot of it's all worthless, despite the amount of time and effort they were put into to get it designed and produced.
Out of the big franchises, one of the hardest things to sell, absolutely impossible, is the Star Trek fact file that went on for volumes and volumes and volumes. You cannot give those away. It's really surprising. People paid so much for them, and you can't give them away.
So someone's holding on to them thinking, oh, but they're worth a fortune. And I agree, they're not. And you're right, Jonathan. People will tolerate poor picture quality over poor audio. And you don't even realize it, actually, which is the most bizarre thing. Anyway, so that's the news as it was. And it's all been bad news, except for as you said, the animated stuff of Doctor Who coming in, which is particularly cool. But let's move on to something now. Okay, kids, that we love this as part of the gag. We're going to show you something, and you have to guess what it is. It's one of these particular moments where we go to
Useless Pop of the Week.
So I saw this, Mr. Aaron, and I go, what the fruikin' hell are you sending me through?
Well, I think if there's a few Doctor Who fans tonight, they're going to know which one this is going to be. We concentrate on pops that maybe you just don't think should ever be made. This is a Doctor Who monster. I don't know if anyone thinks this was one of their favourite monsters. And what gets me with this pop, there are hundreds and hundreds of Doctor Who monsters, literally hundreds, that I would make before this one, because they're classics. And this one is from the new series. And I think one of the problems I've had with the new series, the Jodie Whittaker stuff, is there isn't any new monsters that I go, that's amazing, that's a classic. And I understand why they made this, because it was it was something from the Jodie Whittaker series, and they wanted it to go with that wave of stuff. But it really is one of those figures you go, what were they thinking about? Exactly, the bargain bin. But this is Tim Shaw, which is an alien, and those little spots on his head are teeth, because when he kills his enemies, he keeps trophies and pushes the teeth into his face to show everybody how many people he's killed. Really, yes, really. So that is Tim Shaw. Now, when I say to you, Tim Shaw, Dags, what do you think of?
I might be thinking of this dude.
Yeah, and I tell you what, I wouldn't buy this pop even if he was given away with steak knives. But that was the joke in the episode, where the Doctor kept calling him Tim Shaw. And when they made it, they didn't realise in Australia we have a Tim Shaw that's kind of already a little bit notorious here. I haven't seen him for a while, but there you go.
Mate, they're chucking them away. What can I say? Absolutely fantastic. So, yes, I looked at that, and it's a dude. There's a blue dude with all this white stuff stuck all over his head. His post-it notes. Dude, you're supposed to stick them on the monitor of the screen, not on yourself. So you are right. But wait, there's more. There is always more. Now, there was a question back here. You may have already answered it. I like to at least get onto the questions. It's regarding the animated things for Docky Who. Colin asked, are you a fan? Are you against it or for the animation of the episodes? I think you already answered, but I can't remember.
Absolutely for it. It's one of those things where a lot of fans, they come out and people go, the arms are too long, the animation isn't as good as Disney. And do you know what I think? I think I'm happy I can see it to complain rather than not have anything to complain about at all. I've got to say, some of the animations have been absolutely fantastic. The Evil of the Daleks, which was one of the last ones out, I thought was an amazing.
Very good. Oh, you've had a freeze, mate. Oh, there we go.
And then, yeah. So, yeah, I'm for them, though. I think the animations are worthwhile.
Yeah, I thought, that's what you said. I just wanted to cover that off. So there you go. Very, very good. So more useless pops, and ironically, it happened to be a Docky Who one. Yay, team. We've got an interesting version of this tonight. Normally, it's all about the Ronnie, but we've not got Ronnie tonight. We've got, instead, the Greg King himself. So what are we talking about tonight there, Mr. Aaron?
Well, it's been an interesting week. I've had radio silence from Ronnie. I think maybe because I didn't send him more money for postage. I haven't got any reviews. I haven't got any replies to my emails. The friendship might have worn out. I don't know. He might have, one of his supervisors might have seen the show and that was it. I haven't ordered anything. The two Ronnies to no Ronnies. I haven't ordered anything this week, and I haven't received anything this week, which makes for a short segment. Luckily, I'd asked Greg about some memories from Doctor Who, and I've found some other Doctor Who stuff, as it's a bit of a theme running through this this show tonight. So anyone who's watching this is interesting. Greg, of course, is a long-time Doctor Who fan. I know him through the Doctor Who Club, and we're going to see he bought some stuff today that certainly wasn't $2 from his garage sale, because he sent the receipts, and I was surprised how much some of the stuff cost.
Ronnie is Connie. Oh, Leah. Oh, look at that. Kelvin is, you're broken, Ronnie. So there you go. Everybody's missing. Ronnie's on the run. Oh, God. Jesus. Like everybody's missing, poor bastard. Come on back, son. So there you go. So you asked a question of Greg, is that right? Regarding something?
Tonight's episode is mainly about 80s Doctor Who. It was going to be about Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy, but the Colin Baker stuff blew out so much. It's just about Colin Baker. So some of what Greg has replied, I've sort of modified into the cheaper things segment tonight. So anyone who's here for the Doctor Who, the whole show's themed.
Very good. This is all text-based, so you'll have to read this out, dude. But so this is regarding what Greg King had to say about Docky Who.
So remembering the 80s, the second half of the 80s was an exciting time for me as a Doctor Who fan. Although the 6th and 7th Doctor eras are generally not as well received as the previous ones, it was still new Doctor Who coming out on TV, or in some cases, earlier on VHS, having been recorded off air in England and sent to Aussie fans before being screened here on the TV. Sometimes that was a year earlier than seeing it when the ABC showed it. I was a member of the Doctor Who Club of Victoria, becoming involved in the committee up until the end of '87. So Doctor Who was a significant part of my personal and social life.
Very good.
I was never able to afford costly merchandise, so for me during this time, Doctor Who merchandise was mainly magazines and books. Being pre-internet, our source of information essentially came from Doctor Who magazine, which I bought regularly through the 80s, always looking forward to the next issue. It was a memorable time for Target novels, which I was collecting, as there was great previously unreleased titles coming out. Interestingly, talking about the magazines being the source of information before the internet, an internet bar where you would get information was actually the Minotaur Books magazine racks, where everyone would be standing in front of them reading all the latest news on movies, horror movies, sci-fi. You'd buy one, but for that cost of one, you'd make sure you were there half an hour reading all the news out of everything else.
I had a mate of mine. He used to go to Minotaur because he worked in the city, and it was Minotaur and Swanston Street. That was the Mecca place to go, right? And he actually said to me one time, he picked up a Star log, and as he was flicking through the pages, he's too busy looking at everything else, not even looking at the magazine at all. You go, wow, check it out, check it out. And you're right, that's exactly what you did. So
yeah, because the magazines were air flown in. It was the newest sort of information they were expressed in, but they were expensive because of that too.
Well, that's right. And like I think we've sort of discussed on another aspect of this show. I mean, at that time, because it was the only way to find out information, there was like 7 or 8 different, if not more, variations. So you had Starburst and Starlog and Star this and Star that and this and that. And sometimes you go, oh, that's awesome. Where did this one come from? It only lasts about 4 or 5 issues and then just disappear and be replaced with another one. There's only a handful that were consistent the whole way through, Starlog being the most obvious one.
Do you remember when Minotaur got smart and put everything in plastic and had one browsing copy so they didn't get all their stock destroyed?
Well, it kind of made sense because like people would just pick up things left, right, and center. It would just be like feeding time at the zoo. So, but it was always interesting. You'd wander and you see just like an enormous, like they'd be on the floor, like almost like floor level, and all these dudes standing in front. You got to push your way through. It's like, come on, guys, what do you got? Oh, look at that! Oh, look at that! And your brain goes, where do I start? And people at their lunch breaks, their brains just went and leaked out their ears. So, yeah, it's a good part of history that unfortunately will never come back. Anyway, continuing on with remembering the 80s.
Amongst many others such titles as Celestial Toymaker, The Underwater Menace, Fury from the Deep, Wheel in Space, and The Dalek Master Plan that came out during this time. There was also a few unmade stories like Nightmare Fair, which added to the Target variety in the 80s. And there are some of his original books and magazines which he's talking about, which he's had all the way from that time. So the one in the bottom with the Cybermen, Wheel in Space, he probably got for $4.99 in Minotaur. That book goes for, in mint condition, a couple of $100 now.
Wow.
The other big thing I remember, that made the start of the later 80s was the commercial release of stories on VHS. I didn't get many of these back in the day, but I did get a couple of the earliest releases, Talons of Weng Chiang and Terror of the Zygons. Now, I don't know if you can read those because I had to zoom in on them and look at them myself, but they were VHS tapes in the early 80s, and Greg, the $2 Man King, paid $49 each for those when they originally came out.
Yeah, we got 40. It looks like 44. No, it looks like 44 for the one on the left, and $40 for the one on the right. It's like, bloody hell, dude, that's a lot.
When my pocket money was $5 a month, that's like half a year's pocket money right there. And I tell you what, they haven't appreciated in
no, they'd be sitting in the middle of some landfill somewhere these days. Yeah.
So here's an interesting one, just to keep this back on topic for Greg King's Cheaper Things. One of the best and cheapest buys we ever had during the 80s was when Target cleared out their Doctor Who hardbacks. WHL and sold them to all Target in Australia. And so for 6 months, all the Target stores had tables. These weren't on bookshelves. They had tables of Doctor Who books, and I think they were originally about $4 and then went down to $3.50. And this is a Christmas sale. They're $2.99. So out they go. Now, I don't know if you know anything about hardback stags. Do you think they've gone up in value a wee bit?
See, normally I would have said No, not much, right? But if they're hardbacks, then probably yes, because hardbacks are really only aimed at libraries, right?
Yes.
Soft copies end up being quite cheap. You've got mostly soft copies in your store. So are you trying to lead me to the fact that if you got a hard copy of a certain book, there's a bit of money involved? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Yeah, now hardbacks go for an absolute fortune. There's two Doctor Who areas of collecting I wouldn't want to start now, and that's the character auction figures, especially the classic figures, and the hardbacks, because they've kind of become, like they always were, a bit of a premium item. People collected the paperbacks, but you didn't really get the hardbacks. The difference was the hardbacks were 6 times as much as the paperbacks to buy, so you could get them in specialty stores. But I remember, these are hard to get, but they would sit in stores for years because no one had $39 to buy on to drop on a hardback when you could get the paperback for $2.99. And it was, as you said, mainly libraries that got them because they're more durable. So when these hit the stores in Australia, I went round with my dad. This was before the internet. And I bought like 2 of each that I could find when they were, I think, about $4.95. When they hit $2.99, I went round with my dad and bought every single one I could find and sold them for many years at the Doctor Who Club for $10 a pop. And, you know, because I'm a dirty capitalist dog. If I'd have kept them and sold some of them now, some of them go for thousands of dollars each now. So it's quite amazing. But that's the thing with collecting. Do you hold on to stuff and keep it forever, or do you flip it fast? I think it's one of those things you just can't tell.
You work on the mindset that if you're selling it today, you got to accept that today is today. And if the thing appreciates 10 years from now, you say, you know what, big deal, right? Because if you're going to use that mindset, oh, hang on, tomorrow it'll be worth more, you'll never sell it. You've got to be, that's why I've always said, if you're going to offload something you've got and you've hung on to for years, if you have any doubts about it, keep it, right? The moment you go, you know what, it can disappear off the earth tomorrow, I really don't give a shit, fine, it can go. And then sure, 10 years from now, you might earn an extra few $100, $1,000, whatever you go. But you know what, at the time when I sold it, I made what I wanted to make from it. It's all good, right? You got to have a very clear conscience, because the moment you have even the smallest seed of doubt, it will come back and bite you on the ass. And I was just looking at that picture. Yeah, look at that. I mean, for those who haven't seen it, Planet of the Daleks, two grand. That's £2. Shit, that's like $4,000 or something.
Well, I'm cheating because that was the one that's gone for the most in sort of internet history on eBay the last 3 months, and that wasn't available at Target. But I did get ones that had dust jackets at Target, and some of the dust jacket ones are the earlier ones, are the ones that go for the most. Some of the ones at Target are ones that go for, you know, $500 to $1,000 each now. So just crazy to think something that can't be sold because no one wants it, suddenly everyone is after because of nostalgia and other reasons. Yeah.
And I can imagine the amount of people have said, "Oh shit, I actually had that hard copy of that particular book, and it was chewed by the dog, or you know, I threw it out gave it to the salvos or whatever." There's a few comments here, very very quickly. Jonathan made a mention about never seen a Target catalog before, so he was very very happy about that. There's a lot of talk about videos. Rusty Babes.
Jonathan must have one of those no junk mail things if he's not getting any Target catalogs.
What? And it actually works. Rusky Babes has chucked in a fun factoid about owning videotapes first appeared. Yeah, they were very expensive when they first came out in the mid-'80s. And until they started doing the El Cheapo releases, up to that point, though, $100 a video was not surprising at all. And yes, very, very cool. All right, so we're going to just move on. All right, so that was the Greg Kingsig, a bit of a history, sort of like looking back on a bit of history for the 80s, for which you and I can relate to very, very well, which is particularly cool. But is it the most unappealing thing you could ever see? Absolutely not, because it's now time for the Lord Vile's Vile File. And this is a different one as well, Mr. Aaron. What's going on, mate?
I know that I asked the Vile to put his vile mind towards like a Doctor Who segment so we could keep this show themed today. And I think he's done us proud. What did you think?
It's like, mate, I tell you what, no wonder I'm feeling crook. And I'm not feeling any better by watching more of this. But look at that. The Vile is going to violate Docky Who. What's the deal?
You must be pretty happy that he spelled it right.
At least.
Yes. So look, Lord Vile has even changed his costume to be part of the theme tonight. He's got his scarf and hat. But yes, Lord Vile is looking at some of the vilest Doctor Who monsters. By that, we don't mean the best. I don't think we're going to be seeing Daleks or Cybermen. I think we're going to be in a whole different league from that.
So this would be an interesting sort of memory quiz for a lot of people to go, oh, yes. I mean, it's like saying, oh, if you could think of some vile monsters within the old Doctor Who franchise, what would you come up with? And no, Jodie Whittaker does not constitute of being a monster, by the way. I thought I'd just chuck that in. So we've got some monsters that the vial is going to like violate effectively. Is that right? Here we go.
It is. So when you think of scary monsters and amazing things that are going to terrify you and amaze you and make you hide behind the sofa with fright, you're not going to be thinking of the fish people, that's for sure. The fish people were from a 60s Doctor Who story called Underwater Menace. Half of that story is actually missing. They've got 2 episodes and the other 2 episodes are missing. It isn't, even with the 2 episodes missing, it isn't on a lot of people's must-have returned list. There's a lot of other better episodes. The fish people really did nothing. They sort of swam around and waved a gill at you. They couldn't talk. They didn't really have any nasty properties that they could kill you. They were just swimming around in Atlantis being fish people. Hopefully they didn't get turned into fish fingers.
Very, very good. And here we go. So this is part of the running joke. Is that right there, Mr. Aaron?
Yeah, the Violet, rather than rating them out of 10 or anything, he is going to use one of his friends and actor John Pertwee's facial expressions to rate how bad the monsters are, and I think that's kind of a surprised and amazed look that they made it onto the screen.
Very good. All right, so we violated the fish people. What's next?
Well, when you think of Doctor Who monsters, the scariest things, might be the Cybermen creeping up on you, or a mummy from Pyramids of Mars, or the Crinoid, which is one of Greg King's favorites. You don't think of a giant cactus, do you? And the way the giant cactus was mobile, it managed to put its essence into people. But they never really explained how the cactus made this machine in the first place, because most of the cactuses that I have seen don't actually build stuff and set stuff up and have proficient, engineering skills. So the Vial has chosen Meglos the cactus as one of his vilest Doctor Who monsters.
And so how does good old Johnny Pertwee rate this? Oh, pretty ordinary.
He looks a bit concerned that they would have used this oddly shaped cactus as a monster. I have to say, though, a lot of people go, this is like one of the worst monsters ever. If it had been a Douglas Adams episode, everyone would have gone, brilliant. Only Douglas Adams could have thought of a cactus that wanted to take over the universe. But because it wasn't a Douglas Adams episode, it's just a crap monster.
Very good. Love it. Oh, here we go.
Well, do you know what these are? These are gastropods. They're giant slugs. Mestor is the head of the gastropods, and his evil plan was to blow up a star, and the star would blow up a planet, and the planet had his eggs on, and the explosion would spread his eggs through the galaxy, thus invading the galaxy. Now, that is a slow invasion. How long is it going to take from blowing up a planet to spread eggs through the galaxy?
Yeah, that looks very, very exciting, old son. What can I say? So what do you reckon Johnny Pertwee's going to say about this, do you think?
I don't know. I think you'll be impressed. He's still not that impressed. I don't think we've got him with any of the really vile stuff yet. Let's see what the next one is. Now, this is interesting because this is right back from the 60s. It's one of the earliest things that we're going to violate tonight. It's the slither. And do you know what a slither is, Dags? You're not, so I'm going to just answer you. It's what the Daleks have as a pet. And they brought these to Earth to kind of act like guard dogs. Now, the one in the middle is from the first episode it's in. And then after they filmed it, they decided they better add some attachments to it because it looked a little bit too phallic. You can see in that first one in the top left, like its head has an odd shape. And if you hadn't put those big arms and antennas around it, when it's jumping around, it looks actually quite rude. So we're getting into, the area of the Vial file that the Vial likes, monsters that look like knobs.
Love it. Absolutely fantastic. And yeah, he's a snail up according to this. Yes, very, very cool. All right. So what does Mr. Johnny Pertwee have to think about these guys?
Okay, now we're getting the kind of reaction that I think the Vial was trying to inspire from John Pertwee. I think it only gets better from here.
Very good.
Now this is the Mara. It's sort of a dream demon that uses telekinesis to make itself real. It's the form of a giant snake. And you can see in that picture there, it manifests as kind of a snake tattoo on someone's arm, and then it comes off the arm to look like a small fake snake. And then it grows into a bigger fake snake until it looks like probably the biggest fake snake you've ever seen outside of a Moomba parade, probably.
Yeah, don't forget, guys, there's always time for a snake, for a snake's hiss. All right, very, very cool. That looks like so artificially plastic, it's not funny. So what does Mr. Johnny Pertwee have to think about this one?
Oh, he's getting really into it. He's wrapping his tentacles around that one.
Absolutely fantastic. Oh, very cool. All right, let's go.
Now, this is an interesting monster. The cast dubbed it Puff the Magic Dragon. And basically, it was in an episode, The Mind of Evil, where the mind of evil would manifest your greatest fear. So obviously someone's greatest fear was a crap man dressed as a dragon coming after them. The monster was so bad when they presented it to the show's producer. You can see there's sort of one picture there where it's creeping around the corner, and you can just see it's a man in a suit. He basically vetoed it appearing on screen at all because it was so absolutely crap and dragged the whole episode down.
I love this still photo. It looks like he's got the pistol stuck under its nose. This is a very important one. Moneybag Sullivan has asked regarding the snake. You have to rub it to make it grow. Yes, exactly right. So that never hurts. Very, very cool. Oh my God! Look, Ruddy, the fun factoids are still coming through. Twin Dilemma, worst new Doctor introduction. Is that true?
A couple of the new Doctor, he says there, Time and the Rani, which was another ripper, and then we anything with Jodie Whittaker beats all of them, doesn't it?
I was going to say, yeah, yes or no answer would have worked. Okay, so here, what do you reckon good old Johnny Pertwee had to say about this one?
Well, it was in his episode, so he's particularly excited about this one.
Where did he get these still pictures from, mate? I'll tell you what. So there you go. All right, we're moving right along.
Now, this monster is an Ogron eater. They worshipped it as a god, and it is such a bad monster. There is like 3 frames of it in the series. It basically was so bad. There are no pictures that exist of it, and they didn't put it in the show. And it would be scary for you, Dags, because it looked like a sack full of balloons. So the Ogron's obviously a bit scared of a sack full of balloons. So there's a picture that someone's created it there, but it's such a bad monster that they never really put it into the show other than its head sort of peeking over a cliff.
Yeah, indeed. So what a good old Johnny have to think about this one.
He's particularly disgusted by this one. You can see by the look on his face, this is a really impressive bad monster from his era of the show.
Where are these pictures coming from, dude? All right.
Okay, I think this is the last one. We're not going to get much worse than this. Now, this is Erato. It is a creature from the pit. It's a giant sort of blob of a monster that has one appendage. Now, the interesting thing, when they created it, they didn't really think about how it was going to look on screen. And when it came out looking like that, what's the first thing the Doctor does? He grabs the appendage and he blows into it, which I don't know how they got away with that on kids' television, but that's what they did. And this one is really going to inspire a reaction out of John Pertwee, I think.
Yeah, you know what? It's that picture in the top right, that one right there. And I go, you know what? That is just not good at all. So what did little Johnny have to say about that? Hang on. Okay.
That was a hard picture for the Vile to find, but he scraped the bottom of the dark web to find it. And I think it's very appropriate for the kind of monster that the BBC designed.
Chrissy's got summed it up in one word. Exactly right. Yes. Oh dear. Very good. Erecto. Yes, very, very cool. So
do you know what
are you trying to tell us about all these Docky Who aliens there, Mr. Aaron?
Well, Moneybags already used the best line about snakes. He should have saved up for that last one, shouldn't he? But yes, we've gone through the most vile Doctor Who creatures, and he has, as well as John Pertwee, been well and truly violated.
Oh, goodness gracious me. Freaking hell. Absolutely awesome. Well done, sir. Yes, it all comes to the heading. It sounded like a good idea at the time. So.
Oh, well. So I don't know if
very good.
Maybe we can coax the vial out slowly by stroking him gently.
Oh, geez, coaxing your vial. That's what I like to see. All right, now we're sticking with the Doctor Who theme, and it's as painful as it is. And this one's a bit interesting this time around. So, of course, we've got our eBay section.
Ooh, baby, do you know what that's worth?
But this time we're not actually going to eBay. We're doing something else. So tell us all about it, Mr. Aaron.
So occasionally when we do a special show, we go somewhere apart from eBay. And because this is a Doctor Who show, we've gone to the Rolls Royce of Doctor Who merchandise gets sold at Bonham's auctions in the UK, where the BBC often sells their props and costumes. So we're going to look at props and costumes for Doctor Who that have sold. Guess the price of these. This is new series and old series. So there's something for everyone.
So we got 6 of them this time around, kids, and they were from the prop store, and they were sold in English pounds, but we've converted them to Australian dollars. So what do we got to start with, Mr. Aaron?
So this is a particularly interesting one, especially as Neighbours has just wound up. But this is Our Kylie was on Doctor Who, one of the Christmas specials. And I think it's actually one of the highest rating episodes of Doctor Who ever. I think it got 13 or 14 million viewers in the UK, which is absolutely amazing. This is her costume. She was a waitress. So you get Kylie's French-made costume and boots. Like, that's a dream for a lot of people, isn't it, right there?
Yeah, actually, it's kind of funny when you sit and think about it. If you're a Neighbours fan, a Kylie fan, a Doctor Who fan, or you're just one of those people who likes like waitresses, it just covers all these bases. So you can imagine the worst part would be is you go, oh, I've bought this, right? I'm going to put it on my other half because I wanted to dress up like that, and it turns out it doesn't fit. It's way too small. But that looks very, very cool, and I reckon this has a potential to do quite well. Remember, guys, we are talking about original screen used props and costumes. So let's see how we go. Colin's kicked us off with 55 grand. Holy guacamole. Gavin's at 5,800. Jonathan's at 1,800. Violating Kylie's. The vial often should is the vial at 15 grand. Guy has gone for 6,500. Mark's at 3,000. Steve, good to see Steve joining the show. $1. I think you might have to add an few extra dollars on top of that. He's clearly a home and away fan, not a Neighbours fan. Moneybag Sullivan's gone for 20 grand. Kelvin's gone for $100,000. Bloody hell, prop store auctions. Amounts like this are not unheard of. William has said 8,000. So how good is that? Voyage of the Damned, a Kylie outfit. And you got to admit, yes, it could. This is something I think the value of will just continue to increase. Rob has said $30,000. Absolutely fantastic. All right, because we've got 6 items, we have to play through this pretty quickly. And Bob has said $3 grand as well. Woof, woof. Yeah, well, I don't blame you, dude. Yes, I can kind of imagine that myself. All right, so how much do you reckon it went for, kids? So this is the original Voyage of the Damned costume worn by Kylie. Our Kylie, as you said. How much do you reckon it went for? It went for a whopping $5.5 grand, $5,400. Round figures. What do you want to say?
People said 5,000. Guy said 6.5, which is close.
Gavin's at that. Anything you want to say about this while I'm looking at the numbers, dude?
This is an interesting one. I did think it'd go for more because I've seen Kylie stuff go for more. And like you said, this crosses over to Doctor Who as well. The one thing about Bonhams is sometimes they don't advertise in the right circles. And I often only find out about them because I see stuff come up on forums that they're going to have an auction, and you would think someone who's selling prestigious stuff like that would get the word out there more. So sometimes you can get a bargain.
Yeah, absolutely. Jonathan, I should be so lucky. Well done. Very, very cool. All right, so we're sticking with the old Doctor Who. Oh, check it out.
So this is a monster in quotation marks from the 80s. It's the Candyman. Doctor Who has had a pantheon of monsters. It's had the Daleks and the Cybermen and the Marshmen, but it's also had the Candyman. Now, the Candyman looked a bit like Bertie Bassett. For those who know Licorice All Sorts, it's sort of the mascot for that. So after the BBC did this, they couldn't really do much with the Candyman because Bassetts weren't so happy. But this is a classic and colourful costume from the 80s. It's in complete condition, in pretty nice shape. So the Candyman in the candy kitchen could be coming home to your house to terrorize your children.
Yeah, it just looks complete crap to me. But anyway, whatever. Look, all of a sudden the prices have plummeted. So Angie's gone for 60. Colin's at 500. Moneybag Sutherland, $5. Even I think that's too much, but there you go. And you're right, Rusky Babes. How come this got left out of the file? Totally agree with you. Jonathan's at 3.5 grand. Gavin's at 439, guys at 285. Christy, 1 cent. Yeah, I'd go with that one too. 5 grand for Bob, 2,000 for William, 4,000 for Rob. Kelvin, 20 cents a mixed lollies. Absolutely love it. You get milk bottles with it. And Marcus said 10,000 candies. You do wonder if there would be a demand for this, even if it is screen used and original. It's almost like expect to be bargain basement stuff, wouldn't you? But there you go. You wouldn't want to be wearing this, walking down the street, going up to the little kids. Who wants a boiled lolly? It wouldn't go down too good, would it? All right, so Happiness Patrol, 1988. How much you reckon it went for, everybody? It is an original screen used thing, as ugly as it happens to be. It went for a whopping 3 grand, 3.5 grand. What's the deal with that?
I reckon that's 3 grand real well spent. I'd spend 3 grand on a full Doctor Who costume, and you don't have to worry because you can leave him around your kids because he's got a soft centre.
Very, very good. Jonathan got it. And he still gets a couple $100 back, so which is particularly cool. So yes, that is Yeah, I think you're kind of desperate to grab that one. I mean, if you're going to get like Doctor Who costumes, you want something that I personally think is at least identifiable and to non-Doctor Who fans, such as this. Check it out.
Now, this is an interesting one because the Dalek on the left there is the one for auction, and it is actually the Dalek on the right, and it's been modified for an exhibition by being painted black and changed around by it. But it is 100% confirmed that is a remembrance of the Dalek's Dalek from a story in 1988. It is the Dalek, probably one of the most iconic villains, not just in Doctor Who, but in sci-fi. I think most people would know what a Dalek is. You'd choose that over the Candyman, wouldn't you, Dags?
Any day of the week, dude. Yeah, totally agree with you. And one thing about the Candyman, as Rusky Babes said, yes, he has a licorice centre.
Yeah.
Yes, very, very cool. Yeah, so you reckon this has got winner chicken dinner all over it, even if it doesn't fit in the doorway. So Colin, I'm sorry, hang on, I lost it. Okay, Jonathan's kicked us off at 18 grand. Colin's it's at 20. 30 grand for Moneybag Sullivan. Gavin's at 15,800. 50 grand for William. Guy, I think it was Guy said 11,000. Kelvin's at 20. Rob is at 9. Bob is at 6. Ange is at 20. Rusky Babes is at 10. Now, the funny thing is, of course, replica Daleks are available everywhere. I mean, I actually know Spankin has got one. And, of course, when we talk about Spankin, we're not talking about this Spankin. Couldn't help myself. We're talking about the other Spankin, and but to have an actual proper one, the Ridgy Didge one is the way to go. Mark has said 35,000 Dalek bumps, and Michael has said 25 grand. So it is particularly cool. All right, so 1988, very, very groovy. And so how much do you reckon it went for, guys? It either went for a lot or went for chicken feed. It went for a whopping 35,500 bucks. And I reckon, oh, look at that. Mark is on the right. So hey, Mark, did you put a bid in for this? Because you're right on the hammer, old son. You're only like $26 short.
I was going to say he probably got outbid. His maximum was 35, and someone sniped him at the last moment.
Very good. Anything you want to say about this, dude?
That is one of the most expensive Doctor Who props I've ever seen sold. There's not a lot of people that can afford that kind of money. Usually when that happens, it goes to a museum or maybe a corporation that wants something cool for their foyer, or a Planet Hollywood or something like that. Because I tell you, there aren't a lot of Doctor Who fans that can afford that when they're on their welfare.
It's also worth noting too, and it's actually quite important. I mean, it's been altered for exhibition purposes, as it says up there. Don't also forget, kids, that sometimes original screen use props tend to be busted up and damaged. They look great in the photos. When you get them, you go, "Oh my god, that looks complete crap." But the fact that it is the real deal is the go, and the fact that everybody would recognise it straight away. Oh, this isn't some knockoff that I bought on with a 3D printer. This is the real deal. That will have a lot of fans drooling with envy. What was this? Should remember I was in the sale room on auction day 2012 from memory. So very, very cool. Yeah, exactly. That exterminated you. Very good stuff. Yes, I reckon that is a bit of a winner chicken dinner for those nerds who can afford it. So there you go. Here we go.
Now these will go for a cheap price. If you want like a cheap Doctor Who item that isn't going to set you back, you'd buy just a tie or something like that. This is a lot of, I think it's 5 ties or 3 ties from the David Tennant era. So, these are sort of, you'd find these in the op shop, wouldn't you, Dags? A tie is not going to set you back many hundreds of dollars.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? Normally they wouldn't. And the costume department may have found these somewhere. They may have made them. It's hard to say. There'd be lots of them because clearly the necktie he's wearing there, they wouldn't have had one of those. They would have had like maybe 30 or 40 of those.
Do you know what, Gags? With David Tennant's ties, they're pretty much all off the shelf. So at the time when he was playing the Doctor, you could go into, Laurent or whatever and buy the same tie. And
that's cool. Okay, so they're off the shelf, which is as opposed to individually designed, but they would have multiples of the same one because obviously they've got to use for different takes. But you're right, a couple of neckties. Surely there wouldn't be much going for that. So let's have a look. So Gavin's gone for $750. Jonathan's is at $1,000. Guys at $2,500. Colin is at $1,500. Bob is at $400. Angie's at $650. Christy, look at that. Christy's gone the big numbers, $6,500. Kelvin's at $1,000, Williams at $500, Moneybag Sullivan's at $250, and Rob is at $2,000. They are just neckties, and as you said, you can probably go down to the local shops and buy them off the rack. But these are screen used, worn by good old David Tennant. They may even have his DNA on them. You never know. You might have a food stain on them. We went to the lunch at the cafeteria in between takes, and I never cleaned them. You just never know. I think there's a box of ties, $2 each at the garage sale. Oh, dude, great deal. What's the deal with that? Sorry, dude, what was that?
I was just going to say it might have Billy Piper's DNA on.
There's some comments there, isn't there? And 1,250 Scotch pounds. All right, so what do you reckon? Neckties, they'll sell anything in a prop store auction, and some people would have gone off their nut to buy these. So what do you reckon they went for? They went for a whopping $2,800. All because they're screen used and they're his. How about that?
That is crazy when you think about it. It's just off the shelf tie. And really, you have to take the auction house's word for it that they are the screen used ones. But as you said, the props department or the costume department probably had 10 of each one in standby. How do you know you're getting the ones that were actually worn?
You would have to assume that is screen used. And I agree with you that you'd have to go on the view that everything's being legitimate. And as I said, Guy got it, and he's still got to cop up an extra $300. But they would have lots of them. Because the problem is, you look at that and you go, oh, like this one here, that was just like a one-off. And in actual fact, they probably had 30 or 40 of these, maybe 50 of them, right? Yeah. And that's probably why they bought them off the shelf at the store, because they're readily available. They didn't have to design them or anything. So they just said, can I have 50 of those, 50 of those, 50 of those, 50 of those? And down the track, they've ended up in an auction. And who knows, down the track, version 2 of that and version 3 and version 4 will probably appear. So now this one, I looked at this and I go, oh, dude, why did you pick this?
I put this in just for money bags because I knew it's the kind of outfit he'd like to cosplay. No, this is Sharaz Jek's helmet. It's his mask. And I put this in because Caves of Androzani is recognized as the best Doctor Who adventure ever, from the old and new series in season polls and things like that. On fan polls, it wins again and again and again. So this is a hero prop, a one-off from the most popular Doctor Who story there ever was.
Yeah, okay. It's not the kind. If you bought one of these and you showed your other half, look what I bought, honey, they'd be thinking, oh, okay, where are we going with this? No, it's from Doctor Who. Take my word for it. It's like, really? Oh, yeah, what were they doing in the old Doctor Who? So, yes, anyway. Very, very cool. I just want to last thing. Mark said about Tennant's DNA on the tie. What you want, if you can do it, is find the image of the tie that you've bought on screen and go, that physical one that you're looking at is the one that I've got. When you can do that, which is next to impossible, but when you can do it, that's when you know you've got the money, the value will go up because you can actually physically see it on screen. All right, with the head mask thing, $5,000 for Jonathan. Gavin's at 50. Colin's at 2,000. Kelvin's at 3,000. Bob's at 10,000. Bloody hell. Bob's at 22,000. Very good. Christy, 234. Ange is $2. You know what, Ange? I'm on your side on this one. Moneybag Sullivan's gone for he's not even a real amount there. Mark has said 7,000. So I've got a bit. If I was in the mood for Doctor Who rare collectibles, this wouldn't exactly be on my first list. But I'd probably pick this over the candy thing from earlier on if push came to shove. Marcus said 7,000. William has said 5,000. So there you go. 1,001 uses for, was it Sharaz Jek's headpiece? No problems at all. Yes, it's the best fetish costume in a kid's show. Yes, there's no other way to interpret it, I've got to say. And I agree with you on that one. All right, so how much you reckon it went for, everybody? A mask with 1,001 uses. Yes, indeed, it went for a whopping $8,000. What's the
That-
deal,
that-
Mr. Aaron? $8,500.
Well, that mask obviously has everyone's DNA on, but yeah, because it is recognised as one of the greatest Doctor Who characters from one of the greatest stories, a lot of people went for that piece, and it went for more than a lot of other stuff that I thought looked better. I mean, if you were going to pay $8,000, you could have probably picked up a reasonable sized monster, a bag full of scarves and neckties, and a shirt and a skirt or something.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't see that as $8,000 well spent, unless, as unlike the ties where they got like 50 different variants. With this, they've only got one or two.
Yeah.
Right. That may actually have something to do with it. So, good old guy. You've actually won a couple tonight, Mr. Guy. So you're doing very well, old son. So, very, very cool. I agree with you, Kelvin. It could be used in after party activities. 1,001 uses. Don't let your imagination keep you down. All right, Spadeka with the fancy ones. Here we go.
Now, I've put this one in just for Mark because he's a bit of a Doctor Who Cyberman fan. But this is an original screen-used Cyberman costume. And what makes this one interesting, it's confirmed as being in not just one Doctor Who story, but two. So it's been in the Five Doctors and Silver Nemesis. So it would have originally been in the Five Doctors, and then it would have been upgraded and changed to go into Silver Nemesis. So it's appeared with different Doctors on different eras of the show during the 80s. So this is quite an interesting piece.
And the other advantage it has, as opposed to a Dalek, is you can actually fit it through a doorway. Ange has gone obviously $35,000. Bob's at 25. Jonathan's at 22. Mark is at 18. We're going down. He was like, well, it's like a coal sale here at the moment. Everything's going down. 17,500 for Colin. What does everybody else think of Sidemen suit? Oh, excuse me, a real one too. Where are we? Gavin's gone $50,000. Christie's at 16. Guy's at 14. Violating the Cyberman, as the Vile often does, is the Vile at 42. Williams at 30,000. Moneybag Sullivan is gone for $15,000. So yes, a screen used from the Five Doctors too. Oi, there you go. Cop that. Very, very groovy. Kelvin said 25,100, 2,500. So there you go. Good stuff. All right. So how much do you reckon it went for, kids? This is our last item of all the prop store options. If you add up all the money that's been spent on these so far, just on these 6 items, there's a lot of money being chucked around. And Rob has said $20,000, which is particularly cool. All right. So how much do you reckon it went for? The Cybermen Five Doctors, absolutely awesome. It went for a whopping there's a lot of numbers there, but $16,000, 16,700 round figures. Oh, when Chrissy's at 16, she's not far off it at all. Anything you want to say about this, dude?
I think the interesting thing about this is there were 4 Cybermen in this sale, and this one went for twice as much as the other ones. But it wasn't, I think, because it was from a particular story. It's because I think there were a few bidders who the first one went for 8,000, the second one went for 8,000. The third one went for like 10,000. And then the bidders who wanted a Cyberman realized this was the last one left. So it attracted all the bids in the room. Sometimes it's better to go for the first one in an auction because people think, I'll wait for the second one. But you remember, there's only one winner. And there might be 20 people waiting for the second one who then have to bid more. So generally in auctions, the smart thing is buy the first one, don't wait for the last one.
As someone who's auctioneered at fan club meetings, multiple items, that is completely correct, right? And you are right. People think, the next ones will be cheaper and cheaper. And, of course, the price starts going up. And the last item, you might as well just not have bought it in the first place. So, it's a real trap. And people do fall into it on a regular basis. So very rarely do I find that the first item is most expensive of the lot. It depends on how much competition there is. And providing there is still, like you've got 5 items, but 10 people want them, it can be the way to go. So just buy the damn thing, get it over and done with, and then laugh as everybody else bids higher than what you bid for the preceding items. All right, so that's the end of that. That was particularly cool. Original props and costumes for from the old Docky Who. Now, guess what? Before everybody sort of starts moving on to other things, guess what? It's commercial time, and we've got something very exciting to tell you. There's 2 things. 2, count them, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. The first one is just letting you know that next Tuesday, the old Toys on Trial guys are back. So there you go. They're returning for another Series 2, which is particularly cool. 1 week and about 6 days from now. So if you're not doing anything, make sure you come back and support the guys and check them out on Tuesday night. Toys on Trial for a 6-week run, which is absolutely spectacular. But that is not the coolest thing a week going on. Is that right, Mr. Aaron? What else is happening in the next few days?
So I'm telling everyone here first before it's actually advertised, but Aaron's Collectables is having a We Want Your Tax Return sale. So we have a VIP night this Friday night. It's basically a VIP as anyone who follow us on Facebook, and it's a normal day Friday during the day, but at 5 o'clock we'll close, and at 6 o'clock we will reopen, and we will have 25% off store wide. So that is everything in the store will be 25% off. Can it get any better than that, Dags? It can.
What?
Because Dags will be there as we're having a free pizza and drinks night as well. Soft drinks, everyone. So if you just want to come and hang out and talk some nerdy stuff with us, in between serving, we will be ordering pizzas, free drinks in the shop. We'll be there till late, sort of. We'll party until everyone decides they want to go home.
So just to clarify, if you've got a what do you call it, a gift voucher or anything, or store credit, does that apply or not?
Gift vouchers do, and store credit does apply, but not lay-bys or held items. So if you've got something on lay-by, you can't suddenly get 25% off, and you can't ring the day before and say, can I put this aside and I'll come and pick it up. It's only for the evening. If you cannot make it on the Friday night, that's okay, because we will have 20% off to everyone all weekend. So this is our one annual yearly sale. 25% off Friday night, 6 o'clock till late, and then 20% off all weekend.
Chrissy said, "Isn't there a pizza shop across the road?" There is, but you don't eat the pizzas over there. You want to eat them in Aaron's store with the nerds, mate. That's the thing. You want to hang out with the guys and the girls and talk and nerdy shit, eating pizzas. We had one of these events once before, a year or two ago. Absolutely fantastic night. We all got together. We'll bring a couple of extra chairs in. It is recommended if you want to sit down, you bring your own chair, because there is a shortage of chairs in the store. It is a shop after all. And it was just good to sort of sit back, hang out, talk nerdy stuff, and it's absolutely spectacular. And you've got to go and check it out. I mean, there's nowhere else you want to be on a Friday night. It'll be awesome. And, of course, for those who can't remember where the store is, Shop 3, number 1 Main Street in Blackburn. That's what it looks like. And, of course, if you have a tax return coming your way, spend it at the store, mate. He's chucking stuff away. So how good is that? So, yes, very, very groovy. What do you reckon there, Mr. Aaron?
Yep, come and spend it. The Dags needs a wage.
What I need to do is get rid of this freaking cold. So, yes. And, yes, even though I will be there, I'll probably bring a mask with me. I'm not contagious, okay, even though I might sound like I'm dying at the arse at the moment.
What you're saying is it's not the VIP super spreader event.
No. That's very, very cool. So, Colin's here, you're a classic. He does bring his own chair. I do like the sound of that. So, very good stuff. Yeah, you can. Do you have a Transmat terminal there, Aaron? I'm trying to work it out. I could possibly make it down there. Oh, good on you, Mr. Greg King. Make it. It'll be a fantastic night. And you've got to go and check it out. So it should be fun.
What you can do, carpool and get the entire Bendigo Doctor Who club to come down and give me all their tax returns.
Very, very good. Free pizzas, mate. How good is that? You can't knock that back. So bring along an appetite and get ready to empty your wallet as you buy stuff from the store. So there you go.
Yeah, that's worth 4 hours in the car for, isn't it? A free pizza.
Totally agree there. And if you come walking in looking for Eagle Moss Starships, too bad, so sad, they're already gone. So there you go. Before we move into the main presentation for this evening, just got to let everybody know about our socials. This is not for people watching because most people already know this stuff. But anybody who's watching this on replay, feel free to drop us a line if you want and catch up with us and have a chat about what's going on in the universe. So that's what we're about. And as it is now time, if I'm not mistaken, now we are running a little bit behind time. By the sounds of it, we won't get through this entire presentation. So believe it or not, there will be a part 2 to this Doggy Who talk, and I don't want to have to rush through this. There you go. Very, very cool. So we got a feature presentation. And what are we gasbagging about today? Or what are you gasbagging about? I'm going to disappear in a few minutes because I've got nothing to contribute to this conversation whatsoever.
Well, it's the neighbours special that everyone wanted last week, isn't it? No, it's the Colin Baker era of Doctor Who, the 6th Doctor. It's the mid-80s. We're taking you back to the time of Culture Club and Duran Duran and the AIDS bowling adverts.
It's very funny. Just you mentioned Neighbours. Now that Neighbours is off the air, I saw the ad for Home and Away tonight, and they actually said #1 Australian drama. It didn't take them long, did it? So very, very cool.
So I guess the Colin Baker era really starts with the announcement that Peter Davison was leaving the role. And of course, whenever the Doctor has left the role from Tom Baker, there's always been the speculation that we're going to get a woman next. We're going to get a woman next. The speculation when Peter Davison left was Brian Blessed. He would have been a really interesting Doctor. You know, he could have regenerated and sat up and go, Doctor Who's alive? And it seemed for a while in all the fan press that Brian Blessed was going to be the next Doctor, which would have been really interesting. The way Colin Baker role was written, I could see Brian Blessed playing that role really well as well. Also, of course, there was a whole lot of women whose names were put forward. Now, I didn't really know the actresses. They were obviously higher profile actresses in shows in the UK, but not ones that were showing here. So I was excited by Brian Blessed because I knew him, but we didn't get Brian Blessed. Who did we get?
Well, I'll tell you who didn't get. You didn't get me, so I'm going to buzz off and leave you to it. I've got nothing to contribute, as I said earlier. This is the Aaron show talking about the old Docky Who, so I'm going to disappear.
We got Colin Baker. And when Colin Baker was announced, it was interesting because I had not heard of Colin Baker. He was obviously another character actor from the UK who was big and well known over there. He was in a couple of shows that were popular. He was a villainous character in a show called The Brothers. He was announced as the Doctor, and my parents knew who he was. And so he was obviously an actor who had been in other stuff, but I didn't know who he was. The thing about Colin Baker, though, was because the news was always a lot slower than it is now, where we get everything instantly. The newspapers had some stuff, and then we really didn't see anything until they did the costume call. And one of the probably most famous things about Colin Baker is his amazing technicolored costume. Now, he had got into Doctor Who, wanted to be wearing something smooth and debonair, maybe a black suit like the Master, or a black leather jacket like Christopher Eccleston eventually got. And the producer, John Nathan Turner, said, no, I've got a better idea. I think the Doctor should be wearing something totally tasteless. And so they put together a costume which, yes, was obviously totally tasteless. And at the time, it was a love it or hate it thing. I was only, I think, about 12 at the time when Colin Baker was announced. And I thought the costume was absolutely fantastic. But then it takes a bit of time and a bit of growing up to realise probably isn't really appropriate for a time-travelling Time Lord who most of the time wants to remain incognito where he goes. So Colin Baker was announced. Carrot juice, carrot juice, carrot juice. That's actually his last words before he departed the show. Interesting last words. Colin Baker was announced, and I think he got a lot of promo above what other Doctors got because of the costume. And because of his companion, who was also wearing bright and interesting things. And I guess John Nathan Turner was right in the respect, if you're bright and well seen, the media do pick up on that. And there is a lot of newspaper cuttings and a whole lot of press calls and a whole lot of television clips where he was announced. I wore this tonight because it was the shirt I have that has the most Colin Baker-like colour scheme. So I have some totally tasteless stuff in my wardrobe as well, yes. So yes, we're looking tonight at the Colin Baker era, and it's a short era because he wasn't the longest running Doctor. When he was announced as the Doctor, he said he wanted to be the longest running Doctor ever. It is interesting because I was going to do Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy on the same show, but his era is so full of drama and so full of stuff happening behind the scenes. To do it justice, we have to look at each of the eras separately. And he has as much merchandise as, or even more than Peter Davison, who was the previous Doctor. And I think that is a bit to do with how the producer merchandised him and merchandised the show at the time, and also because Doctor Who was really taking off in America. So the first thing that ever comes through with a new Doctor is the print material and the papers and things like that. And because Doctor Who magazine was working hand in hand with the production department, they got all these amazing colour stills. So it is a era when Doctor Who magazine really did stand out on the shelf from everything that was around it. Just because when you're wearing a costume like that, you really do stand out. By this time, fanzines, local club fan magazines, were becoming more and more professional. So before this, most of the fanzines that were available were probably run off on photocopiers, black and white. Very rare to see anything colour. This was before colour photocopies, so you'd have to take it to a printer to get colour. And Doctor Who Bulletin started to rise up as one of the, I guess, best fanzines worldwide for news and reviews on Doctor Who. And it actually rivaled Doctor Who magazine on news because it was unofficial. They would print stuff that Doctor Who magazine wouldn't. So you had the official Doctor Who magazine that was sanctioned by the BBC saying, this is what's coming out, this is amazing, here's all the stills. And you had Doctor Who Bulletin that was run by fans that had leaks and moles in the production office and would reveal stuff before it was needed. It was really the beginning of professional fandom, I guess, where the people who run it almost could stop their regular jobs and do this full time because it was doing so well. Now, the Doctor Who from this era really divides people. A lot of people who grew up with it love it. A lot of people who were already Doctor Who fans thought this was a step in the wrong direction for the series. But one of the things that most people agree with is the comic books during this era, and that's mainly the strip in Doctor Who magazine, is one of the greatest Doctor Who comic book eras. The Colin Baker magazine comic strip is fantastic, and it's probably for me the last great era of Doctor Who comics. I think after his run that the comic was never as good again, not for me anyway. Interestingly, in this picture they had a really amazing way to deal with the regeneration. There was a bounty out on the Doctor and a detective was looking for him, and they had that picture of Peter Davison and said, the Doctor looks like this, and then they had a picture of Colin Baker, or he may be disguised looking like this. And that's how they dealt with the regeneration in the comic book, where they sort of just slipped one issue to the next from one Doctor to the next and didn't have to show the TV regeneration. But within the narrative of the comic book, it worked really well. This era of the comic, the artwork is very, very, I guess, reminiscent of the great American Marvel comics. It's different from what we'd had before. It was already going that way because Doctor Who magazine was one of the Marvel magazines. It was still done by British artists, but it had that aesthetic where it could do well in America as well. When we've looked at some of the older magazines like I guess TV21 or Countdown, it's a more painterly and a more, I guess, artistic rather than comics telling through stories the way they do in the Davison and the Colin Baker stories. So this is a really great grounding if you want to get into comics by reading the Colin Baker issues and the Colin Baker stories. And they are great stories, and they are things that I haven't seen done in other comics or in Doctor Who. And to Gavin, Tom and Colin aren't related at all. No, it's just a common name. So the Doctor Who stories up to that point had been popular with fans, but they really hadn't been popular enough to get their own comic book compendiums. The Tom Baker stuff, because Tom Baker was popular in America, had been reprinted by Marvel and had a short run of about 25 issues. Colin Baker was popular enough. The strip in the magazine was black and white, but it was recognised as such quality material that the Doctor Who team put together graphic novels and coloured it. And colour for the time, there wasn't a lot in the weekly comics, so seeing it in colour was absolutely amazing. And when you've already bought something, because you get the magazine week by week, it's really hard to double dip, especially when you're younger and don't have a lot of money, on colour issues of the same thing that you already have. But I do remember that the comics were so good that they were instant buys for me. And it was an era of the show that the comic anyway that was so popular. You can see in the bottom, it was even reprinted in Germany, which is one of the few comics up until the modern era that has ever received a foreign language translation and print outside the UK. So they must have been doing something right with the comic book at least, to get such a good reputation and be able to print and read around the world. Of course, at this time, Target novelizations were in full swing, and I think if anyone's collected books, you are always going to collect everything that comes out to get the set. When we look at this slide, it's really interesting. You have the proof cover of the Twin Dilemma, which was rejected. And it wasn't rejected because there was anything wrong with the cover. It's because Target had up to that point not really paid any of the actors that appeared in their artwork any residuals. And Colin Baker's agent said, do you know, it'd be nice if you kicked Colin a bit of money for him being on your merchandise. So Target did what any reasonable company would do. They got rid of the cover and they did a new version of the Twin Dilemma with the Mestor on, which is a bit funny. And Colin Baker even laments that, where he says, oh, look, you know, my agent did that. I would have probably liked to have been on the covers a bit more than I was. And from that point, he really wasn't on the cover of any of the books for quite a while. Interestingly, with Doctor Who, you can see that the titles on those books all have different styles. And unlike other series, which, you know, each book comes out in order, when Target were releasing Doctor Who, it was so popular that they were going back into the back catalogue of Doctor Who episodes and novelising stuff from the 70s and the 60s and the couple from the 80s that hadn't been done. And so all these books were coming out from various eras. What that meant is, even though Colin Baker was the current Doctor, his second story wasn't novelised until down the track, and that's why it's got the Seventh Doctor's logo. But what's got to be one of the longest waits between a Doctor Who story coming out and it being novelised, that last white book there, Revelation of the Daleks, came out last year. So there was not big gaps. There was about 3 or 4 stories in the Target back catalogue that never got novelised back in the 80s and 90s when Target was around, either through rights issues, mainly with the Daleks, or some of the Douglas Adams stuff, just because it was too expensive to use him. And those rights issues only cleared up last year. So there is now a full run of original Doctor Who stories from Target. But that's a really interesting wait. So have you ever waited that long for something, Dags?
No, I haven't, but I've got a question for you before I disappear again. So with the books, because the character of the Doctor it's the same character, just in different iterations. If you actually have a book that gets released and the actor's not featured on the cover, do you actually know which Doctor it is? Is it based on the companion? Is it they give any reference? Do they just say the Doctor and you just got to work out which number it is?
They've done it in different ways. Sometimes in the front of the books, they had the changing face of Doctor Who and just a little thing inside that said which Doctor it was. Target had, and it might have been because the BBC asked them, a policy of not using anyone but the current Doctor on the books at the time. So I guess that was a publicity thing because they didn't want to confuse people. In the 80s, though, when fandom got a bit bigger and Doctor Who was kind of more well-known and had a history, they started putting other Doctors on, and everyone loved that. It was really a silly thing that they got rid of it, but that's something that happened. Usually on the back, on the blurb, it might say, you know, the second Doctor and Jamie or something. Yeah,
because I'm thinking if you picked up a book today written, say, in the 1990s, we'll say 2000s, right, early mid 2000s, and it doesn't actually say which Doctor it is, you have to you just imagine which one it is, or if it's written on the back though, that would make sense. So,
well, when I was a kid, there were a couple of books that just had the TARDIS on the cover, and before there was episode guides, I didn't know who the companions and everyone were. And there was one book, The Keys of Marinus, that just has the TARDIS in space. And for years, I didn't know which Doctor I was reading when I read the book. So, yeah.
I guess that's the bonus. You can sort of imagine your favorite one, whoever that happens to be, and you just slot them in and you're good to go. So, yeah. All right, very good. All right, see you.
So, yes, and then the second series of the Colin Baker run was Trial of a Time Lord. And again, we have the original artwork there for the first episode of Trial of the Time Lord, which I think is great artwork. For Ultimate Foe, the finale, and they couldn't again get the rights from the actors and actress, so they went with a different version. So as we go through any anomalies and little things like that, we'll be having a look at just to see some of the more unusual artwork. If we go to the next slide, that is the rest of the Colin Baker stories. So he didn't have a long run as the Doctor. We are going to talk about that as we go along, but we've got the Trial of a Time Lord, and because of what I was saying before, So the later books were obviously aimed at serious fans. That's absolutely true. The earlier ones were more for kids, and it's often been said Doctor Who probably taught more kids to read than any other book series. One of the things that annoyed me as a fan, Trial of a Time Lord wasn't released in order. Even though it's a 14 episode that build up the one story, they released part 1 first, part 3 second, I think part 4 third, and then part 2 came last, which used to do my head in. And they had set up this thing where the first 3 issues were all light blue spines, and then the last one the editor had changed or something, so it was a white spine and didn't match up. And they used to do that a lot in Target, and it was one of those things, because the books weren't released in any particular order, just when sort of the author was able to novelize them and send them in. You'd often get stuff from other eras, and books wouldn't like follow one another, and you'd have some that came out 1 month apart, Master Plan Part 1 and Dalek Master Plan Part 2, fine. But then other ones where they'd have one ready to go and then the author would not deliver on time. So Target books were a crazy mess that everybody loved collecting. And which one turned up again, you didn't really know until we started getting the book reports in Doctor Who magazine and Doctor Who Bulletin. The covers were absolutely fantastic. It is interesting with the eras of Doctor Who, the 60s books and the 70s early books are Chris Achilleos covers, and then by the 70s and the end of the 70s and the 80s, you get Andrew Skilleder, and then by the 90s it's Alistair Pearson, and each one has a different style, and the era is instantly recognizable. But when you put the books in order, it's just a mix of all different ones. Nightmare Fair and others next to it were cancelled Colin Baker stories, and this is one of those things. Colin Baker has a series that was planned and written and wasn't aired because the show was cancelled, but some of the merchandise for that still came out, so he's unique in that respect. Although Big Finish, the audio dramas, have released some of the other unreleased stories from other eras, from scripts that weren't used and weren't picked up. So if we can go to the next slide. Now, we've talked about this in different franchises before. You're really big if you start seeing yourself on food packaging. And contrary to what the BBC would have you believe, Doctor Who during the Colin Baker's early run was popular and very, very in the mainstream. And there were different people, different companies that did use his image on stuff. And one of the big advertising campaigns was the Golden Wonder crisps and things. And you could see there was packages and adverts for it. And the first promo they did was for a series of mini comics. And the comics are quite nice little comic books that were reprints in colour of the Doctor Who magazine comic strip, which is interesting because I was saying they didn't originally do them in colour. So these books were great to get because you could see colour versions of them. And there are fans that try and collect everything. Now, I've got a couple of the packagings, but I've never been able to track down all of the packagings. And when I did this show, I found packaging I didn't know existed. So if we go to the next slide, there's more crisps and related stuff. And I had never seen the Oddens, which are those weird shaped ones in blue down the bottom center. So I've probably got half of those. For me, I don't need to have every single piece of chip memorabilia. It's just nice to have some to go with the comics. The other thing I didn't realize, Golden Wonder did 2 promos for the Colin Baker years. Now, I had known about the mini comics for a while, but not until I was researching this did I realize they did a second promo, which was for the Doctor Who 1987 calendar. And those 2 chip packets above the calendar are the ones, neither of which I've had before, where you can send away and get a free calendar if you bought the chips. So they were popular enough that after the first promotion, they came back and used them again. So Doctor Who, despite what the BBC was telling everyone, was very popular. Colin Baker's first full season started off with 9 million viewers, which is an amazing rating even back then. And I've gone across into the calendars. As I've said, from the era, the 80s, we got away from the more black and white pictures, and you get a lot of this more airbrushed stuff. And it really does set the era apart, where you've got they're very, very well done, almost stylized pictures of Colin Baker. When I mean stylized, they take out a lot of the blemishes and things like that because they're airbrushed. And Andrew Skilleter was a master of this. And we looked at some of his stuff because he did some Jerry Anderson stuff as well. But he is an amazing genre artist. And he did a whole lot of stuff for the Peter Davison and Colin Baker era. Yes, we will be looking at the cancellation. Really, it's one of those things that people still argue about and still don't know what happened today. There are a lot of official people who've come out and said it straight, and then other people contradict that. So I don't think we'll ever know exactly what the motivation was behind the cancellation. But, you know, it's one of those things that happened, and Doctor Who came back from it, and then it went away again, and then it came back. But if we talk about that, we'll never get through all of the merchandise, and that's what we're here for. So, again, every era of Doctor Who, except for Patrick Troughton, has had jigsaws, and Colin Baker was the same. He had 2 artwork jigsaws, and I think these were a step up from the Peter Davison ones. When we looked at those, they were sort of badly, not even Photoshop, but cut and pasted pictures of the Doctor, where these, they actually have some artistic merit. The Dalek one is particularly nice with Dalek, the red Dalek and Davros, and a gold Dalek and a silver Dalek. And you've got one that the Doctor is up front and central, and the other where the Dalek is up front and central. And there's a little tiny Perry way off in the background of that one as well. So these jigsaws were one of those things that weren't heavily advertised. I didn't know about them until after the Colin Baker era, but they're nice children's jigsaws and a good addition to any Doctor Who collection. And the other thing that every Doctor has had is the Doctor Who Annual. And the Doctor Who Annual was one of the mainstays of, I guess, not just my Christmas, but a lot of Christmases, where it was the thing everyone got each year under the Christmas tree if you were a fan of a show. There were annuals for every popular show in the UK, and Doctor Who was one of the longest running annuals. This was the 21st year, and it's very interesting. Doctor Who was on a high. They just had the 20th anniversary. It was a huge success. They'd have the 5 Doctors. The Doctor had regenerated. A lot of people were watching the show. The annuals were selling very, very well. This is one of the ones, even though the 80s is nearly 40 years ago, it's still easy to find because they sold so many of them when they came out. The 80s annuals are particularly easy to get, not because no one wants them, because so many people bought them at the time that a lot of them turn up secondhand and you can still pick them up in good condition. The artwork isn't as good, I don't think, in these later annuals as it was in the earlier ones, but that's just a change in style of the house style of world distributors who put out the annuals. So that was the 85 annual, and the 86 annual is an interesting one when we go across to that, because this is the last of the world distributor Doctor Who annuals. So there was a 20-year run of Doctor Who annuals, and this was the last one. And it just shows you the fortunes of the show changed so much within a year that this one didn't sell very much at all. And I think one of the reasons Doctor Who died wasn't because it was a bad show, but it was the perception that the BBC allowed it to have to not be popular, and them saying it looked cheap and nasty, where you watch it now and it's no worse than anything from the time, and it's quite imaginative, and what they do with the budget is quite good. But I think because they wanted the show to go away, they let fan criticism, taint the actual public view of things. So suddenly Doctor Who wasn't a beloved show anymore. It was a show for nerds and geeks, and there's not many people watching it. And the BBC really wanted to get rid of the show, and that has an effect on the merchandise that came out. So that's the last Doctor Who annual. And so the last story in the last Doctor Who annual was with the Master. I think it was called Radio Waves. These are some of the posters and promotional material, like postcards, that came out at the time. Again, when Colin Baker took over as the Doctor, there was posters everywhere. You would go into Ministor and they'd be in the poster racks, and they'd even be in a couple of the other bookshops. The promotional postcards are something that's always been around with Doctor Who. They had the cast cards originally, and then they changed them to the colour postcards. We had a lot through the Davison era. With Colin Baker, there were 2 versions of his Doctor Who card. They're both very similar. You probably could mistake them as the same card. And then both his companions got postcards as well, Nicola Bryant as Perry and Bonnie Langford as Mel. And then one of the things that stood out with the Doctor was he had a cat badge, and every episode the cat badge on his lapel changed. And so these have been marketed over the years. Originally, there were some official ones. Now you can get on Etsy and find people have done replicas of the Doctor's cat badge. And you can see in the bottom left corner there is a stylized postcard of the Doctor's costume. That's a more modern one where you could get like a postcard pack of every single Doctor's costume. And of course, Colin Baker's Love It or Hate It is probably always going to be the most instantly identifiable just because of how it was designed. So Doctor Who had the Target books, and there wasn't much competition for the Target books, but a series of books come out where I guess they were like the Choose Your Own Adventure books that everyone knows, but they were called the Make Your Own Adventure series. I guess they couldn't do the same name. And interestingly enough, the ones on the left are the British and the ones we got released in Australia, and the ones on the right are the same books, but they're the American books. And you can see the difference in the marketing that they're aiming for, because the ones on the left are really more kid-friendly or look like they should be in the kids section of the bookshop, where the American ones are much more adult science fiction covers and obviously aimed at older fans. So it's interesting to see the perception of what English publishers think of the books and what American publishers think of the books. And that sort of goes to show you what I was saying about the perception of the show in the UK had kind of taken a beating, where in America it was still popular and on the way up, and people over there couldn't understand why the BBC had want to cancel it. Whereas in the UK, a lot of fans had been complaining about the show for a long time, so it wasn't as big a surprise to the British audience. Here's some of the more unusual items that were released in the Colin Baker era. The top two items there are playmats, and they're sort of big carpet squares that have action pictures from the series on. They're quite hard to get, and if you do get them, don't get them sent to you rolled, because the rubber underneath will crack and destroy instantly if you ever try to do that. They released the Colin Baker version, and you can see on the top left, the top right, Colin Perry coming out of the TARDIS. Tom Baker was still popular enough, they released a variant with him and Leela and K9. So poor old Peter Davison, they didn't bother doing one for him. But these are unusual items, and it shows you that Doctor Who was still popular enough that different merchandisers thought they could get some money out of it. Along the bottom there are two different series of busts. The first busts are of the first 6 Doctors, and then the second set of busts are from a monster from each of those Doctors. The first set must have sold reasonably well, because you do see them on the secondary market, and they wouldn't have made the second set if the first set hadn't sold. The second set is really impossible to find. I've never had a set of the second set, and they rarely turn up on the secondary market. So obviously from that, there was no third set of companions or anything like that. But again, it shows the diversity of the merchandise that was being released at the time for the Colin Baker era. John Nathan Turner was the producer of the show through the whole 80s until it was eventually cancelled, and he was quite a controversial character. A lot of fans loved him because he was very involved with fandom and would mix with fans, and a lot of fans hated him because they thought that he took too much notice in fandom and liked that and didn't get on with the job and produce a good version of the show. He was a person that did seem to use Doctor Who to his own benefit when he was producer. And I guess if you are in a role, you can do that. He produced a couple of books during the time. There's the TARDIS Inside Out and the Companions. The criticism I think a lot of people would have with these books, they are very hastily put together with not a lot of new facts or research going into them, and a lot of the artwork for the TARDIS Inside Out was obviously existing artwork that they reappropriated for the book. I guess they took that into consideration, because the second book, The Companions, the presentation is a lot better. There was a lot more original artwork and a lot more different things in it. The written material still wasn't the most amazing Doctor Who stuff ever, but his partner at the time was the production assistant on Doctor Who, and he got to release his own book too. And now the book we're about to show probably is one of the most useless Doctor Who books that ever was released. The Doctor Who Cookbook. This book is the interesting idea of going to people who had appeared in Doctor Who at the time and previously and getting a couple of their favourite recipes, modifying them so they sound Doctor Who-ish, and then releasing it as a cookbook. Now, I don't know if anyone watching the show knows this. I am an amateur chef and I do all the cooking at home, and I do love cooking and doing things. This book was particularly useless. A lot of the actors decided they would make it more fun for Doctor Who fans by sort of making stories about the recipes and having Dalek pudding with exterminate sauce and making it sound really interesting, but none of the recipes in there I would call cordon bleu. Some of them were passable, but it is on my list of collectibles, and I have a lot of them, one of the more useless books for Doctor Who. And I guess that's why some people love it, because it is one of those weird things you love to hate. This book was in bargain bins through the 80s and 90s here in Australia, and you could not go into an op shop without seeing a couple of them. They kind of have dried up now, but they were one of the easiest items to find and the hardest for shops to sell. Now we've got here another one of the collectibles that started up during the 80s. Andrew Skilleder, who I said set up a company, Who Dares, that merchandised a lot of his artwork. And one of the things that were very popular were bookmarks. And the thing for me is I first saw these bookmarks because a Doctor Who magazine, I think it was issue 105, came out with a free bookmark on the cover. And then I had the dilemma of being a collector, of walking into the newsagents and seeing it, and all 6 issues in my newsagents had different bookmarks on the cover. And I'm freaking out, telling my parents I have to buy all 6 issues because I need all of the different bookmarks, which is quite irrational and goes into what we were talking about on our other show about obsession and addiction to pop culture. But my parents were good. They eventually let me choose 3. So I got like Colin Baker, because that was the current Doctor, and the TARDIS and K9. And again, because the internet wasn't around, I didn't know how many bookmarks there were in the set. I think there was 18 in the set all up, and you could buy them as 2 lots of 9 from Who Dares. Now, interestingly, Who Dares is still around. And recently they've released retro collections where they've updated New Doctors and completed the 80s versions of bookmarks with New Doctors and new artwork, which I think is quite interesting and taps into nostalgia, because I try and stay away from new Doctor Who merchandise, but when people do stuff like that, I end up having to get it because it seems to make my original collection incomplete. Now, one of the big things in the 80s, and I'm sure anyone who lived through it will remember this, holograms. Holograms for about 2 years were on everything. They were on watches, they were on jewelry. They were expensive too, because they were this brand new thing that looked amazing. And I remember seeing stories on Simon Townsend's Wonderworld on how holograms worked and how laser technology and how they were amazing. And then they went away again. But Doctor Who took advantage of this new technology, and they released a series of amazing, I think there's still quite good postcards with holograms of different monsters, and then there's the one of the TARDIS, and the hologram is actually the time vortex in the background. It kind of leads into our next thing, though. On the left there's Doctor Who single, a 12-inch single, which had an amazing hologram as the viewer on the TARDIS scanner with all the monsters on. And I've tried in the bottom right corner to get a better picture of that, but you can't really see it too well. But it's got the Daleks and the Cybermen and some of the things like that. The hologram merchandise is still quite amazing and still quite eye-catching, and takes me back to that time where there was toys called Supernaturals that were holograms, and holograms were the big thing everywhere for their 15 minutes of fame. But that single was not the only single that was released during Colin Baker's time as the Doctor. There was some other records released. And We had the Doctor Who theme again, which was the same one the BBC had been releasing for the past 5 or 6 years, but they updated it with Colin Baker's picture. And there was different pressings for those who collect records. You know, you don't just get the British pressing, you get the Australian and the American and maybe the New Zealand, and maybe somewhere else releases it as well. And so there was that version of it. And then there was the BBC sleeve version that had a totally different label. Doctor Who the Music Volume 2 came out for people who liked the I guess the synthesized ambience of Doctor Who stories. You could now listen to them on your record player or on your tape deck in the car. I remember trying to get my parents to put in Doctor Who music in the car and just being told, no, we'd rather listen to Neil Mitchell and talkback radio and not things like the Keller machine. Also there, we see probably the first merchandise we're starting to look at to do with the cancellation of the show, and that's a single called Doctor in Distress. And I was thinking about that as I was preparing for this show, because it's a bit of a joke. It's a bit of a pathetic song. But I was thinking about it and going, you know, they'd had We Are the World and Do They Know It's Christmas? And they were for, you know, amazingly good charitable causes. And then a TV show is so popular, you get celebrities and people from the show, and you get artists who come together to release a protest song for Doctor Who being cancelled. And, you know, it sounds funny and it's a bit of a joke, but again, it goes to show that the BBC probably did underestimate how popular Doctor Who was. Interestingly, it was recorded and bombed instantly because the BBC were never going to play it. They're not going to play a protest song protesting one of the shows they're trying to cancel. It is a bit of a pathetic song, but it is also one of those strangely very catchy songs, especially the chorus to it. If we go to the next slide though, Dags, this is the cancellation. And anyone who collects newspaper articles, it is probably the most prolific amount of media that Doctor Who has ever had, except maybe when it came back. But definitely during the original run, every single newspaper, it was front page news. Again, it surprised the BBC how much hatred they got for trying to cancel this show. It was, I remember, news in Australia on the ABC, but all the commercial networks as well, which really surprised me at the time, because you did not see any news of Doctor Who outside the ABC. In fact, you watched the ABC to avoid the news because it was on at the same time as Doctor Who on the other channels, and suddenly I'm trying to record all the other channels and get news of the cancellation because it was all over the place. Doctor Who was cancelled, they said, because it was looking old and tired and they wanted to use the money to launch other shows. Again, when I've watched the whole Colin Baker era this last week leading up to this, it didn't look old and tired. It looked exactly the same as it always was. It's never going to be the best produced show ever because it's done on a shoestring. But I think the thing that fans love about Doctor Who, it's the stories that capture the imagination, and they're very forgiving of the sets and the monsters and things like that. The other thing is the BBC accused it of being cheap and nasty. They were the ones who would not increase the budget, so it couldn't compete with new things that were coming out like Star Trek and Star Wars. And I did think it was very unfair that Michael Grade said they went and watched Star Wars and then looked at Doctor Who and laughed at how pathetic it was compared to Star Wars. That's because Star Wars is a Hollywood movie with a huge budget and Doctor Who is made on a shoestring. Anyway, the cancellation happened and it sent shockwaves through fandom, and this affected the merchandise as well. And one of the things that occurred, what I was talking about earlier, there was a protest charity song written called Doctor in Distress. And it gathered together a lot of the Doctor Who cast who put together a music clip, which I had never seen till it was released on DVD years and years later, because it never got played, not even once that I remember locally. It is a very, very 80s clip with like lots of sort of generic computer effects in it. But basically, it was a protest song, but all the money that was made for it went for cancer and went to cancer relief. And I have seen a lot of people criticize, saying, oh, do you know, We Are the World, and that was very, very worthy because it went to charity, but Doctor Who wants to release a song like this to bring a show back. Well, it was to bring awareness to what was happening, but all the proceeds did go to charity, so there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. It is a bad song. It is in that category of so bad it's good. If you want to track it down, you can find it on YouTube. Doctor in Distress, Let's All Answer His SOS. The chorus is okay. What it does prove is try and get musicians to sing. Don't get your lead actors and extras from the show to sing, because it's obviously going to sound pretty dud. Have you ever heard that, Dags? No? Okay.
Jesus, trust you to bring me in right when you least expect it. Hang on, I'm not even sitting up straight. No. How would I have heard that? Jesus.
I was wondering just during fandom, because you're around fandom, if you'd ever heard it and had a laugh kind of thing.
All right. No worries. Well, now that you have brought me back. Sorry, I had to give you the full screen for a second there because there was a picture there you didn't mention, and I thought, I've got to get around it. So,
sorry.
There you go. All right. Do you still want to keep going? Because you've still got a fair bit. No, you're not going to get through it all, are you?
No, we're not going to. This is going to be a double episode, guys, because we're not even halfway through the Colin Baker era yet, I don't think.
Well, considering you're finishing on the old Docky Who's in distress because he's gotten cancelled, maybe it's a good opportunity for us to wrap this one up as well. What do you reckon on, son?
Okay, well, I think that way we'll have it'll be easy because next week's show's probably all there. I think it's one of those things where the Colin Baker era is easy to talk about because there was so much controversy happening behind the scenes and in front of the camera at the time when it was on. I mean, they have just released this season, what we're talking about, on Blu-ray about 4 weeks ago, and watching the extras, all this new stuff has come out that I had never heard about Doctor Who before, particularly Nicola Bryant's interview and some of the Colin Baker stuff. But do you know who they interviewed for the Blu-ray, Dags? No, you wouldn't know. They interviewed Michael Grade, who cancelled the show. And, you know, he was the controller of the BBC at the time, and he is most known in his career, and he's had a long and illustrious career for cancelling Doctor Who. So it is one of those things that was very historical for the time.
It's also worth noting, keeping things into context. Like the show was obviously very big in the 60s. You know, it really wasn't competing against much. It gets to the 70s, it's pretty much on its own. It's doing really, really well, kicking big goals with Pertwee and Baker and all that sort of stuff. By the time you got into the 80s, science fiction as a whole in the media and the movies and TV shows had really ramped up, became a real big industry. So what once was the show can stand on its own 2 feet, look around and go, you know what, we're better than everybody else. Suddenly you're competing against all this other stuff, as you said, with higher budgets, and there's a lot more stuff going on overseas. And by comparison, poor old Doctor Who would have looked a bit on the cheap side when they said, because they hadn't, I'm guessing they hadn't really changed much in terms of the production quality because it was a TV show. So comparing it against big budget movies that were kicking massive goals in the 80s, it's a bit of an unfair comparison. But I can also imagine they're saying, well, we're not going to boost the budget to match the movies that are being produced in America, so deal with what you got. And if there's a bit of a feeling that it's a bit cheap and nasty, that wouldn't work well for it at all. And it obviously didn't. So
this week I've been going down the rabbit hole and looking at a lot of different stuff, and there's a lot of stuff I don't think even fans consider when they talk about the BBC axing the show, that just looking at this and looking at different things, you know, I should have a board behind me with all strings and stuff because it is conspiracy theory stuff. But Doctor Who in the 80s, it was being shown in 100 countries and there was 100 million viewers worldwide. Current Doctor Who is shown in 80 countries and has 80 million viewers worldwide. So it was more popular in the 80s. But you can see in fandom, as I was reading it, the BBC ups the price of episodes to America. So where it was the most popular, which was public broadcast, it made it impossible for them to be able to afford it. And at the time, they were saying, we need more money out of it. And I look at it now and go, no, they were actually trying to stop the show being sold overseas because they really wanted to strangle it. Now, that might be just my conspiracy thing, but it is interesting where fans are arguing this show makes more money in revenue than it does to make, so why are you cancelling it? And at the same time, the BBC triple and quadruple the price to buy it overseas, and everyone overseas then has to stop buying it. It really is like dominoes going down. And at the time, before the internet, fans probably couldn't see all this, but you look back at it now and go, that was pretty dastardly of them. They really were trying to kill this show.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you look back, as you said, looking at history, how things transpired at the time, and yeah, comparing that era to this era. And even I know I've done the right thing whenever Rusky Babes agrees with me. Go, yeah, woohoo! So there you go. I know I've done the right thing there. Um, but of course, the show had been running for like 20 years straight at this point, and it's like, even the best of TV shows have their ups and downs, and at some point, some people will say, "Oh, geez, it's a bit long in the tooth," especially if the concept is the same since the very beginning. So I can understand why some people thought different things at the time, but especially if you had what you would class as the golden era, with not necessarily Hartnell so much, but definitely with Pertwee and Tom Baker. And then you'd be looking a bit later on and go, "Oh, Colin Baker's not really cutting the mustard as well." I mean, if you go upwards continually, great. But as soon as someone feels that there's a dip in it, and they go, "It's not as good as it used to be," then all of a sudden the doubts kick in, and then the naysayers will start thinking, "Yeah, maybe it's time to give it the flick." So sometimes it's just bad timing. So there you go.
It's interesting in the interview. Michael Grade goes, "I didn't cut it because I hate science fiction, but I didn't cut it because it was science fiction, because I would be a bad controller if I cut everything I didn't like. I have to." And then he sort of goes, "I cut it because, it looked cheap and nasty." And all the other science fiction that was being produced at the time looked exactly the same. And often there was to Tripods, which was hailed as the new Doctor Who, and everyone said, "Nah, Doctor Who's better." You wanted to say
and the irony being, of course, that regardless of these new shows coming out and being fantastic and spectacular, how many of them lasted the distance?
Yeah.
None. So there you
the
go.
The big one was the BBC put a lot of money into the Chronicles of Narnia. I don't know if you remember that series. And the first episode came out. It was front cover of Radio Times, and it was the same week as the 25th anniversary. And all the reviews, Narnia annihilated by the magic of Doctor Who, but the BBC had all their eggs in the one basket with Narnia, and Doctor Who didn't get any advertising at all. So, yeah.
Okay, and just to wrap it up now, a moment ago, Rusky Babes said what I said was fantastic, and look at that. And look at Rusky, he's on your side too. So how good's that? We got the Rusky Babes double whammy. So anyway, we could yap on about Doctor Who. I can't believe I'm saying this for hours and just really getting to the meat of it all. Oh my God, I'm in the zone of all of a sudden. Where's me Time Lord? Give me a cat badge or something. So we're going to buzz off and leave you to it. Now, the big thing, of course, is on Friday night at Aaron's store. Make sure you'll be there. Get some free pizzas, 25% off everything in the store. You might even be able to buy Aaron himself. Chucking them away we are. So buy one, get one free. Is that right, Mr. Aaron? Is that how it works?
Yeah, and Russell's been so nice tonight. He gets an extra slice of pizza if he can make it down.
Oh, very good. I'll even pass it over to him. The Rusky Babes, here's your slice of pizza. Oh, that's come back to me. What can I say? Well, there wasn't enough fun factoids in the last episode, i.e. tonight, to warrant your extra piece. Anyway, we're going to buzz off, guys. We're going to leave you to it. We'll see you in a couple of days. But if you're not there at the store on Friday, we'll see you next week for a bit more Doctor Who action. In the interim, make sure you keep all your Colin and Baker collectibles mint in box.
And make sure you rip Perry off the card.
Ooh, mate, like the sound of that. Okay, leave you to it, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Have a good night, guys. See you.